Hello and welcome. I am DEJI360. The face-off between Rivers State Governor Siminalayi Fubara and his political godfather and the Minister of Federal Capital Territory Nyesom Wike has once again cast a spotlight on Godfatherism in the country's politics. Barely 6 months after Fubara came into office as governor, he doesn't appear to see eye to eye with the man on whose back he rode into office. Things boiled over recently when the State House of Assembly initiated an impeachment proceeding against the governor. It's generally believed that the majority of the state lawmakers are loyalists of Wike. Of course, the governor didn't take things lying low. He marched to the State House of Assembly complex and declared what the lawmakers had done null and void. A few lawmakers loyal to him would later announce the suspension of the speaker and installed their own speaker. The president has since intervened in the crisis by meeting both the governor and his political godfather, and things appear to be relatively calm for now. But the crisis is far from over, I can tell you that. Truth is, no one knows exactly what the problem is between both men. But if the statement made by Wike when he received some PDP governors and elders of the South is anything to go by, then it appears that the heart of the whole drama is an attempt by the governor to take over the political structure of his godfather and hobnobbing with his political enemies. Everyone is waiting to see how all of this event is eventually resolved. For now, the governor would appear to have backed down, but we'll wait to see what happens to the impeachment process and how the crisis in the Rivers State House of Assembly is resolved. But joining me now to discuss this further, I have a political affairs analyst and one-time chieftain of the PDP, Dr. Farouk Bibi. Farouk. Also joining us on the program is Adewale Ajadi, who is a lawyer and a public affairs analyst. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming on the program. I think I'll start with you, Dr. Farouk. Tell me what you make of what is playing out in Rivers State.
Well, I think not only myself, I don't think anybody in the political scene is actually surprised, because what's happening is actually become the culture of Nigerian politics, of Nigerian transition politics, at least at the level of the governorships. It started right from day one, right from 1999. I can remember that Namani of Enugu State and Jim Obodo started their own on the day of election victory, not even swearing in. When the day it was announced PDP had won, Namani had become the governor-elect. He took offense that people rushed to Jim Obodo's house to congratulate him passing his own house. And so that was the day the die was cast, and it has continued. And up to now, it's unfortunately the culture of Nigerian politics is now politics of Godfatherism and betrayal in quotes of the godfathers, and the sometimes ascendance of the godsons and taking over of the structures, or at least becoming relevant and sometimes failing. There is nothing more discussed on the ideologies of the group, on the focus and vision of the political parties or political groups in which the governors either formed or belonged to, in which they ensured transition took place in. So it's sad that this is what might remain for a very long time, our political culture. It has reasons, and the reasons are actually well ingrained into the system. And I do not think this democracy can be able to escape this drama of an outgoing governor, in particular, anointing somebody, who financing somebody, taking the campaign of somebody and creating a successor, and then coming around to demand too much from the successor, or if not demanding too much of the successor himself, turning around to decide that he would not be dictated to, and this creates crises and problems. And within 2 cycles, a lot of people make a lot of gains and resources politically, and this is one of the worst, I would say. This Wike and Fubara could be one of the worst scenarios that would have in this kind of drama.
Well, we'll just wait and see how it plays out. But let me ask you, Mr. Ajadi, I mean, you've been following the drama, of course. We've seen the president intervene. We've seen some PDP governors intervene as well. But you look at the demeanor of both men. It's difficult to say. It will be difficult to say this is completely over.
Well, thank you for inviting me on. This is if you look at Trump and Trumpism and what happens, this is what we bought into with an American system. It's a triumph of ego over performance all the time. And it's also very, if you don't mind my saying so, from the left field, also closely associated with the male ego. Most of our politicians, if not all, are men and are born in a macho, misogynistic culture where the pissing contest is just the natural side effect of masculinity. And if you start to break it down, what the governors should be looking for is a legacy. Look at our 36 states. Barely are any of them really performing. And when they perform, it is the imperialness and imperviousness of reality with which governors travel, with which they act, with which they behave. It's a very difficult thing to walk away from and to leave that kind of power. So if you look at the system, as just been said, that we practice, is a system that triumphs in two things, power and wealth. And those two things are not things that people feel convenient to walk away from. So I don't think we are going to run away from this play, this tragedy that plays out. And Nigeria increasingly, if you look at the level of voter apathy, it's increasing considerably. And the reason why voter apathy is increasing is, one, because of the kinds of elections that some states have, and Rivers State exemplifies this, where the strong men take over and the voters are scared away. That's one fundamental issue. And the second is participation of the citizenry in governance is very limited. So it's just a materialistic thing. And you cannot blame a sitting executive governor for wanting to relate to all the constituencies in a state, whatever the politics is. And unfortunately, we mix politics, governance, and development. There's a difference between what makes political sense, which is avoid the enemies of your godfather, with effective governance if you really want to do it. It's not possible to effectively govern a state like Rivers State and ignoring large chunks of Rivers State, which are ethnically driven in their politics and might not be in your godfather's domain. That's very difficult too. So these are very, very impossible things, and it never ends well. It never ends well for the godfather, with the exception of Bola Ahmed Tinubu. I don't think that anybody has been able to
and let me ask you, that's what I was going to come up with that. Look, Dr. Farouk has given examples. I mean, he talked about Namani. We've seen this all over the country, even in the north of the country. We've seen it. Ganduje and Kwankwaso, a clear example. Saraki, I'm talking about the senior Saraki now, and Lawal back in the 90s, a clear example. We've seen it in Edo State as well. We've seen it all over. But one state has been an exception, and that is Lagos, where one godfather, if you like, has been able to hold things together for a very long time. So what makes Lagos different? Let me ask you, I think I'll have to ask you that, Mr. Ajadi. What do you think makes Lagos different? Why has one man been able to hold it together all this while? And others just can't do it?
So it's my speculation, but what has been happening is a mixture of kindness and ruthlessness that's been utilized. It's a mixture. From ground up in Lagos, there is organization. It's not just the person at the top. So the person at the top is made sure that in every ward, there's some kind of organizational system. The second thing is the organization allegedly and supposedly is for the party's interest, not just for the interest of the person who's leading it. And thirdly, most importantly, is the proverbial kindness and largesse that's been exercised on behalf of everybody. One of the things that Tinubu is peculiar for is the fact that the people around him get opportunities, they get spaces, and they move on. It's not just about him, at least allegedly in government positioning. So that carries people along. And there's a way to do these things, I suppose. But the ultimate thing is that it is really down to us citizens, not so much down to the politicians, that we allow the politicians to do this macho kind of politics that is not, that might be effective on the short term politically, but it's not effective for development on the long run, is a very interesting thing. Lagos has been able to sidetrack that in many respects, but there are glaring gaps also in Lagos that we are going to see as we go along. So, there's no system that is perfect, but we have to interrogate this system and challenge these men in the way that they're doing it. They can do it in a benign way, at least in the short term. And in longer term, we organize ourselves to make sure that whoever is at the executive post is actually a servant of the people, rather than a godfather or a domain king.
Dr. Farouk, what do you think? Why do you think Lagos has been different? And let's just face it, even the whole concept of Godfatherism itself, it's not really bad in the actual sense of it. The only problem is that you have situations where probably some people just overplayed.
Well, let me first of all say, I think the reason why I said that this particular conflict would be one of the worst is because of Lagos, is because of Bola Tinubu. Because we are now dealing with a master player in that game who is supposed to be the person that will stop it, or at least control it, contain it, first and foremost. So he doesn't have the moral justification to call anyone to order. Secondly, he has an interest. Now that he has adopted Wike into his government, into his system, he would want a very strong Wike in Rivers State for the purpose of 2027 for the Rivers State and for South-South as a whole. And that's what he's programming Wike. So to weaken Wike by losing the governor would not be in his interest. So he would continue to give Wike the backing, most likely to continue to intimidate the governor. And with the resources available to the governor, he's likely going to fight back. And so it's going to be probably dirty for quite a while. Godfatherism actually is a mafia term. Let's put it where it stands. When there is an ideological inclination and you make a hero worship of somebody who comes with beautiful ideas politically or economically that work, that perform, that answer questions, yes, you can have those either political, academic, or scientific heroes. But when it comes to being a godfather, it's an entirely different training where most of the activity comes about taking resources legitimately or illegitimately, exercising power from its most tamed level to its most violent level.
But can't you have, sorry to interject, can't you have a godfather who, just ensures that the ship remains steady and that, that things move along the path of development? And the reason I ask this is, even when you go to Singapore, whether we like it or not, Lee Kuan Yew is just like a godfather. And we saw that at some point when he was not satisfied with the way the country was being run, he came out openly and, challenged the president at the time. We've seen this in other countries as well. So I'm just wondering, can't we have a godfather who is a godfather and works towards something positive for society and ensures that, leaders that come after him or those who are under him, walk along that path, the path of positivity and for the development of society?
I would not agree that people like Lee Kuan Yew or Mahathir Mohamad had ever described themselves as godfathers. They have had leadership and they had focus and they had people around them who helped them achieve that objective. And when it came to transition, they transited and opted out and kept away. When there were problems on the ideological persuasions and the ideological directions and visions, they came back and objected. Both Lee Kuan Yew and Mahathir Mohamad are clearly there, but they did not maintain a permanent hold and interest on state. They did not attempt to capture state through their surrogates. They did not make it a duty to remain there forever, and their names and their decisions and their ambitions or their directives must remain whether they had power or did not have power. That comes with godfatherism. But I think leaders are great. They are great leaders and who ruled, who had followership within the system, whose followership was able to, because of their personality, achieve a lot for the country. And they moved away. Most of it is positive. I got to know the word Godfather actually through the mafia. So
yeah, you must have read Mario Puzo's The Godfather.
Corporate entity. You don't have a godfather in your organization. You have a chairman, you have a COO, you have every nomenclature. Any nomenclature, godfather, apart from in the mafia.
Well, maybe the problem is the nomenclature, but let me come to you, Mr. Ajadi. When you hear Wike, for instance, say that, look, I don't want anything from the governor. All I'm just saying is that he shouldn't touch my structure and he shouldn't hobnob with my enemy. How do you feel?
Well, that means I replace my brain with your brain. It's that simple. I would think for you. I will tell you what you should not touch, and I'll tell you exactly what you should touch, and I'll leave you within that. And that's what the governor signed up to, I believe. However, having said that, I think it's not true that the leader of Singapore, I don't mean that argumentatively, or the leader of Malaysia are not godfathers. They are godfathers. And they are godfathers in a different way, in a more benign way. And the truth is that we can see that the Prime Minister of Singapore, of Malaysia is still involved in politics. Malaysia, yes. Still involved.
Because you talked about Malaysia, we saw that at some point, I'll call him the Godfather. He just wasn't satisfied and had to come back. But
he's still involved in politics. However, the truth is these are forms of leadership. They're not necessarily completely bad or completely good. They are directive forms of leadership where they are participatory forms of leadership. We have chosen a participatory form of leadership. And the participatory form requires for people to recognize that you cannot direct a living. If you want a governor that you direct, then that's not a governor. That's a servant. When you say an executive governor cannot make discretionary choices because of his political interest, that's very destructive to the interest of the people. And that means your interest, however you perceive it, is superior to the interest of the people. And that curtails democracy. We don't have the conversation about the effectiveness of this model. That's part of the problem. It's a model. It's also the model that Chief Awolowo used against SL Akintola, whichever way you look at it. Yes, so this has been with us forever. And I insist that this has to do with masculinity and the flaws of masculinity. If we add more women in politics and we have variations of the two genders in politics, it would not be as easy and people won't just trot around and say these things blithely without people challenging them. This is an issue, and it's really not down to the politicians per se. It is down to us as a people. We allow this system to function because what we are convinced about is our interest, our wealth creating interest, our wealth retention interest, our political and power interest, our office and placement interest, and we negotiate away the future of our people to become participants where we disagree. Of course, you will disagree. How can't you disagree with your godfather? There's nothing wrong with that. I disagree with you. That's what an adult child does with a father. Let's assume that's a father. And if the person you put in as governor says, oh, this is how I want to do it, okay, these are the consequences, these are the benefits, this is how I see it. But we don't do that. We say we have to control you because we are concerned and we don't trust that person.
Dr. Farouk, you look at the way, this whole issue of Godfatherism now has played out in Nigeria. You look at all the cases we've had. Could we say the godfathers are actually at fault, or it's just a question of the godsons to probably not doing their part? Because most of these godsons actually signed up to some of these things. I mean, you come to a man, you want him to make you governor, he makes you governor, he does everything for you. That there are certain things you must understand. So why not understand and learn how to manage that godfather and get things smooth for yourself? So instead of going all out to fight the godfather, at the end of the day, governance suffers. We've had situations in Lagos here where we saw that, let's not deny it. In Lagos, under former Governor Fashola, there was a problem between him and the godfather at the time. But he carefully managed it in spite of, external influences, people trying to intervene and trying to tell him, do this, go against the God. But he was able to manage the situation, and he did fantastically well in office. So why is it that other godsons are not learning from examples like that?
Well, first and foremost, I think the concept of the Godfatherism that we're looking at and we're trying to define and accept is not part of the responsibilities of other constitutional responsibilities or administrative responsibilities or even political responsibilities of the people that come to power. They are not supposed to come to power to serve the interest of one individual, no matter what amount of contribution that individual made. By the time they have a constitutional responsibility, an oath of office, then they are supposed to serve within themselves their God, the Constitution, and the people. And whatever the Godfather, in quotes, wants, I think it has to be something really mainly outside those major
what you are saying, isn't that it's like that's just the ideal, but it's not the reality. So how do you deal with the reality?
We can expand Godfatherism if we want to put it godson, godfather, like you can adopt a mentor somebody, which means a godfather would really be a godfather to one, maybe two persons he's mentoring within the political system, not an alpha and omega controlling the structure and insisting that nobody should use the structure for any other purposes but for what he requires and what he wants. That is a domineering dictatorship beyond the concept of that personal relationship of being a godfather. You do not belittle somebody's capacities, history, governance, abilities, and decide that it cannot go beyond your own time because you want to remain relevant. And this is precisely what they do. To tell you the truth, many of them look for the weakest links within their groups of supporters and try to upgrade that person, bring him to the point where they will create a person that is forever dependent on them without the abilities to move the state or perform his functions properly, so that he will always rely on them politically. He will want to rely on them in all other governance perspectives or indices. And this is what they aspire. And the moment you begin to become independent or begin to see things in your own way, problems will start. And it was all over. In Lagos, it was like that. Wherever you saw it, it was like that. At the end of the day, it is either the godfather loses or the godson loses. But there will be a personality clash because the godfather insists that the personality of the godson should be subservient to his own personality. Whereas the powers, the executive powers available are not anymore with him. And this is where the crisis is. And this is where I think it is the way we run our politics and the way we accept how we run our politics. We have certain weak links, very weak links in our political system, especially. It's not just about the American system. It's about how we adopted our American system. The weakest link in this system we have in Nigeria now is the state assembly. And that is why you see most of the battles are fought in the state assemblies. Since 1999, the state assemblies have just been kowtowing whatever the governors wanted. There has not been a state assembly that has stood independent for 1 minute since 1999. And because of that, they allow the governors to become extra powerful, too rich with people's resources because nobody checks them. And with those extra resources, they formed a governors forum and they addressed every other aspect of the polity, including the creation of the presidency, the creation of the justices, the creation of the police officers, INEC people. Everywhere they make sure that with those resources, they use them to ensure that they remain the most prominent group within the political system. And it is just because the state assemblies have not and cannot and have not attempted in any way to control the governors. So any person that wants to extricate himself from the godfathers, you see that the first thing you would want to do is to run to the state assemblies and get them on his side. The National Assembly, whoever they are, members of the National Assembly of that state, might not be as relevant to the governor as members of the state assemblies. And a lot of times you find that members of the state assemblies are created from the houseboys and drivers and errand boys of governors at the point of their creation. So this is where our main problem is, that creates this godfatherism that gives powers to those godfathers, and that's where the conflict is. And I think if we want to address it, we need to find a way to empower the state assemblies in a manner where they like it or not, they could be able to stand firmly. Because no state assembly so far has been able to stand on anything that the governor goes against.
Jadi, let me give you the final word. What's your take on this? Just the same question I asked Dr. Farouk there. If one person has been able to manage the situation very well, why is it difficult for others to learn? Just learn, take that template and try to implement. And the reason I ask this is because, look, at the end of the day, it usually does not go well for any state at all where the godfathers or the godson takes on their godfathers. We've seen that in all the states. Take Abia State as a clear example. When the Oji decided to go after the other Oji. I mean, we're seeing it in Edo State as well.
Well, you see, I thank the doctor for what he said, because it puts into sharp relief what we're seeing. I think that ultimately we have not been honest with ourselves. And that is that the craft of the state has been hijacked completely by individuals out of sheer power, sheer arrogance, and daring do. That's the truth. And because one has worked well or seems to work better than the others, does not mean that this is not a total and abject destructive process, this so-called Godfatherism. I think that and we have seen it also lead to what happened in the presidential elections, let's be honest, because it's the governors that made the presidential election exactly the way it is. I mean, we have a popular candidate that won on all levels that we're talking about legitimately. That's not what I'm disputing. But the internal politics of the APC, it's very clear that's
true.
Yeah. So let's be clear. Let me move to the positive, because I can go on about this. It's so corrosive and so damaging, ultimately. And it has nothing to do with the individuals, but a systemic damage is being done to this country. Because ultimately, the participatory level of people is going to continue to diminish as a result of these incredibly reckless fights between men. You have cut out 50% of the population, and the rest 50% is spending its time just doing a pissing contest. And the one that is the most ruthless wins, and the one that is most ruthless continues to win until they fight till the end, and then that one becomes more ruthless than the other one.
Exactly.
And there's so many parts of that we're not surfacing. But I think what has to happen is every state should have a constitution. You see, what the Buhari government started to do very powerfully was try to get the state out of assembly independent of the governor by sending money directly to them. I think it's called Executive Order number 11 or number 9, I'm not sure. And the judiciary. But that was negated in the constitutional review, I think. I'm not completely sure about what happened in the end. I don't know, it was not fully implemented.
Yeah. I
think what we need to do is get a constitutional change that means that every state should have a subset constitution. And in that constitution, the rights and responsibility and accountabilities need to be set up so that the House of Assembly can act independent, have resources independent of the governor, and be able to ensure that the governor is accountable to as best as is possible, that the judiciary is able to act independent of the governor, that the local government elections are held regularly and they are independent of the governor. Because what we have is governors that become incredibly out of control. And without naming names, there are governors that funded a lot of the conflicts in the Middle Belt from the resources of their state, even though they are far away from the Middle Belt. There are governors that have been funding conflict in different parts of the country for their own political gain. This is not acceptable. We can't continue this way. So we're not talking about Godfatherism as if it's just two individuals. We're talking about the fact that we don't have a state. If we continue this way, we're just going to have the winner-takes-all system that's going to be so toxic that anything will go. And we're getting very close to it every day.
And you know, the irony of it all is that you look at it, you begin to wonder if there can be an end to Godfatherism, because the way it plays out is that, a godfather makes a political godson. That political godson eventually gains his freedom, and then he becomes a godfather himself, and and tries to run things as well. And then at the end of the day, he himself grooms a political godson who takes over from him. That political godson at some point will want some kind of freedom, and then he creates his own environment of leadership, and he becomes a godfather himself. So it's like there's no end to it, because we've seen this in all the states that we have mentioned, in all the states. But gentlemen, thank you very much for coming on the program, and thank you for sharing your wonderful thoughts with us. I thank you so very much. Well, we'll take a short break here, and we'll be right back. Stay with us, don't go away.
Opinions are free, facts are sacred, but truth is universal.
How, in practical terms, can we, for instance, de-escalate the tension?
President must see himself as the President of the Federal Republic.
We know where the enemy is. 3 places. The Lake Chad Basin, the border area between Nigeria and Cameroon, and then the Sambisa Forest.
On DEJI360, we give you a complete dose of everything. Opinion, facts, and undiluted truth.
I hardly believe what politicians say in this part of the world.
A new Nigeria is possible, a future is possible.
We delve into the issues, dissect it so that you can understand it, use it to take action.
I don't think there's any need for any governor to look for grant for ranching.
DEJI360, dissecting the issues.